Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. As a passionate entrepreneur with a desire to create places where people and business thrive, I hope to inspire you to find your place at work and in life so you can live a life by design. You'll hear stories of transformation, exploring everything from organizational psychology to brand, and identifying opportunities in your workplace and your life to inspire your human potential. So, let's get started. Preparing ourselves for the future of work can be a daunting task. Faced with the rapid transformation of technology, the adoption of automation and AI into our workplaces, and let's not forget to throw in there a dose of global pandemic. Who could blame you for thinking that the outlook was challenging? But as you'll hear from today's guest, it is also filled with possibility. Andrea Clarke is an advocate for people becoming future fit. As a former television news reporter and Washington D.C. correspondent, Andrea covered major news events for Jazeera English, the Pentagon channel and Thomson Reuters before working on humanitarian aid programs to rebuild Iraq and Afghanistan. Andrea then led the communication campaign for the Save Darfur advocacy movement to stop the genocide in Sudan. Through her work, she has been fulfilling her life's purpose for growing careers and in 2012 founded Future Fit Co., a digital learning business developing future fit people at scale by accelerating the skills needed to lead with impact. She is also the author of the award-winning book Future Fit: How to Stay Relevant and Competitive in the Future of Work. In today's chat, we cover how Andrea's career in front of the camera inspired her desire for others to communicate with impact, what it means to be future fit and the steps you can take to prepare yourself for the future of work, the value of a growth mindset and how this skill alone will propel your career forward, the importance of shared purpose within organizations, how to find it and communicate it, the silver lining of COVID and how it has opened the door for us to redesign our world of work for the better, how creativity is in all of us and what you can do to tap into yours, Andrea's own sense of purpose and the events that led her to understanding and articulating her own values, and the routines and rituals that Andrea uses to ensure she's showing up as her best self. As quoted by Andrea, the future of work is about our talent. It's about the way we negotiate change, actively pursue transformation, and deploy human skills to create value, both for ourselves and the organizations we work for. Andrea is an engaging and straight-talking woman on a mission to transform our organizations from the individual level for a better future. Please let me introduce you to Andrea Clarke. So today I am joined here by Andrea Clarke. Thank you for joining me, Andrea, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. So, look, I want to dive straight in, and I've read your book, Future Fit, and you open the book by describing your arrival into Baghdad in 2008, and it's in the midst of a war. You're getting into Baghdad without being shot down as your first major achievement to really getting in the ground before the job even begins. How did a country kid from Gundawindi end up in Baghdad?
Well, what a great question, and one I was probably trying to answer as that aircraft was landing. But look, I was quite intentional about working in a conflict zone. I actually did a master's in defence studies following my BA because I had an intention to work as a war correspondent. And as it happened, I ended up being in a conflict zone in a role as an international aid worker. But nevertheless, I think I never had a fear of being in a conflict zone, particularly in that context, because there was so much security and so much rigour and so many security checkpoints that I had to go through to actually work on the ground there. So I felt really safe, even though it was an extremely volatile context.
Oh, wow. And so as your time there as an international aid worker, your fight or flight response must have been absolutely kicking in, and for the real reasons that we have it. How did you manage your own mental headspace in some of those situations that I know that you've been in because of the stories that you tell in the book?
You know, sometimes not very well, sometimes better than others, but overall, I try to come back to my breath and I try to come back to breathing in for 4, holding for 4 and out for 4, which I talk about in the book. So that Navy SEALs box breathing technique is something that I feel has helped me manage and stay sane in, quite a variety of situations where it would be really easy to, lose control of your emotions, because they're very real scenarios. The stakes are high, the risks are real, and the danger is there. It's all around you. So I know that has stopped me having full-blown anxiety attacks before, for sure.
Yeah, I just can't imagine being in that situation myself. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly what goes through my mind, and when I recall that now, I feel so closely connected to the emotion of being there that it feels like it could have been yesterday. And I certainly remember thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm here, and so I'm going to be the very best version of myself, in this scenario as I can to get the job done, because that mission is so much greater than the way I'm feeling about myself at the moment. My degree of discomfort is nothing compared to what local Iraqis are going through on the ground. And same with the trip that I did to Georgia, where we walked into like the most dilapidated orphanage for mentally and physically disabled children. Now, I can't tell you how distressing that was at the time, but I just had to get over myself. It's what those situations as a reporter or an aid worker, they're never about you. They're only about the people on the ground that you're trying to help. So you just connect back into that, what's my shared purpose here?
And it is that higher sense of purpose, because you need to be connecting into that thing that's well and truly beyond you, so that you can sort of, I suppose, summon up that courage and that will to be able to put yourself into those situations.
Just to set aside the dramatics of your own emotion, because, they're certainly there, but you've just got to get out of your own road in those situations.
Yeah, certainly some interesting situations that you have experienced there. And so with an earlier career in journalism, what inspired your obsession for growing the careers of others in what you do now with the Future Fit Co?
Well, it's interesting because other reporters listening to this will know what I'm talking about. But when you are talking to someone, you want the very best version of their story to come across, so you can help them instigate change or reform or whatever it is that they want to do. You want to help them do that by delivering the message in the right way that's clear and compelling. And so I guess as a reporter, I always felt that I wanted that best version of the talent to come across. And so it was an easy transition for me to step out from beside the camera and say, okay, I'm going to train you to communicate the best way you can about your message, or I'm going to help you get connected with your purpose so you can start that campaign, or you can, pursue whatever it is that you feel really strongly about. But it's all about simply looking at someone and thinking, I want you to do it. I want you to be that person that you want to be, and be that change maker in whatever way you want to go about that.
So there was a bit of coaching that you were doing sort of behind the scenes in order to be able to get that best story out when you were putting someone in front of the camera, when you were doing that interview as a correspondent.
Always. And, many times you'd be, unfortunately, rocking up to a scene which was literally the worst day of someone's life. So you'd be coming into contact with people in all different scenarios, but often it would be a tragedy, which is, really something to kind of comprehend in retrospect. That compound tragedy that you deal with as a reporter. And so you want them to, if there's a message in there, you want them to tell that the best way they can. And so you're helping them slow down, pause, start again, all of the simple and very basic things that you need to be able to get a consistent grab out of someone. Because when someone's gone through trauma, it's really difficult to wrap words around that. But equally, when you're dealing with someone on the best day of their life, it can be the emotions the other end of the spectrum. But the whole point is to get that message across to the audience in a way that's going to have impact, because communication is not about output, it's about impact.
And it's about finding the right language, I suppose, too, and the right words to be able to wrap around those emotions and those feelings that these people will be experiencing.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
So this whole series that we are doing here today is around work-life by design. Now, I feel that even just the story you've just shared there, your whole mission in life is really to ensure others are really consciously designing a work life by design and ensuring that they are becoming future fit. What does it mean to you to be future fit?
It means having the skills that will consistently defy disruption. It's about agency, it's about initiative, it's about being in control. That personal agency is, I think, the underlying lesson about being future fit, because that's about having this core belief in yourself to deliver and to absorb change regardless of what's going on in the marketplace. So it's that internal locus of control that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that consistent belief that you're always going to be fine, but it's about knowing that you're always going to be in control.
Yeah, okay. And did a lot of that underpin the lessons that you've learned from coaching people to put them in front of camera as a journalist? Did that start to form in those days so that you could then start to see where those real sort of key pillars are that you would be incorporating into what becomes being future fit?
Yeah, I think being future fit to me going back 10 years, because this started when I was working in the States in between sort of 2004 and 2010-ish, 12-ish. But those lessons hit me hard during those years because what I started to realise was that I needed to have those skills that would allow me to consistently be relevant and competitive. So as a freelance journalist, I needed to be highly adaptable. I need to have an amazing network. I need to be a sharp communicator. I needed to understand what leadership was when you're leading a team remotely, because we did a lot of that as a reporter and certainly as a foreign correspondent. And creativity, what's the role of creativity? So all of these skills I had to deploy all day, every day in my role as a reporter and a producer. And, I started to really wake up to the fact that these were the skills that were highly transferable to the workforce in general. And if you were constantly investing in these skills, if you were recalibrating them constantly, then you were always going to be the person who was creating value for the business that you worked for, and therefore you'd always be in demand. So that to me is a lesson that's transferred directly from broadcast to the boardroom, carrying all of those skills across and learning fast, adapting and creating value. That is what the 2020s will be about. But for me in my career, it was always about that, because you'd be out of work. If you missed a deadline or if you were hard to deal with, you wouldn't get called back for another shift.
Yeah, make or break careers.
That's right, yeah.
And do you think those skills, though, are something that's inherent to certain individuals, high performers? Because, again, I would presume that you would have been quite a high performer in that role, and the fact that you had that internal agency to find that adaptability and the flexibility and to learn those skills so that you did call back for the next shift. Is that something that you think is within everybody, or is it certain individuals that sort of sit within that realm?
Absolutely. The 2020s is all about mindset, skill set and behaviours. Being future fit is about those three things. And it starts with personal agency. It starts with attitude. Attitude's a huge factor here for all of us. So if you've got a growth mindset, you can learn and grow all of these skills. If you've got a fixed mindset, I think that's a dangerous place to be. I think there's no more dangerous time to be neutral on change, to be neutral on growth, and to be kind of a bystander to this change that we're all collectively seeing.
And I think that's really interesting that you say that about growth mindset and a fixed mindset, because I tend to agree with you. And what I've seen and experienced as well is that those that are willing to learn and to try and put themselves out there in that little bit more of an uncomfortable situation to try and continue to grow and to excel, they're going to succeed in these areas because of that awareness. Whereas those with a fixed mindset are a bit more easier to give up and, to think that it's beyond their capability because of that self-limiting.
And is that wild that anyone would think that they couldn't grow? It's about will over skill. And I think businesses will be hiring for will over skill in the next 10 years, because that's what they need to transform business, to digitise business, to innovate and to move everyone forward, and also to mobilise teams, to mobilise and engage teams in the most difficult context that we've ever been in takes a serious and deep amount of will. And you need people who believe in themselves. You need people with that core belief and, a very strong sense of personal agency.
Yeah, and that whole commitment, like you said, that will piece is that attitude to bring that to the table and to excel forward.
Yeah, and there's a difference between commitment and motivation, as my dear friend Lisa Stevenson told me a few weeks ago, because we talk about how we were deeply motivated when we woke up to not have any chocolate that day. Yeah. But, are we committed to actually seeing it through?
That's a really good time. I hadn't actually thought about it like that.
I thought, what a great distinction to make, and it's really shifted my mind to how I'm being committed to certain things in my life. I'm highly motivated, but my commitment isn't necessarily always there to follow through. And I think that we all can take something from that. How committed are you to upgrading your skills and creating value in the business that you're in, whether that's someone else's or your own?
And what do you think some of that commitment that sits in those businesses is from an individual perspective? What do you think, or what have you observed that makes some people more committed to a business than others?
I think the people I see who are incredibly committed are deeply connected, closely connected to the value that they bring to a business, and they're closely connected to the values and the shared purpose of the business. And we've just seen that with a really interesting report that's come out from the World Economic Forum like a week ago. There were 3 reasons why people stayed at a business, and we're looking at staying through COVID and beyond COVID. And one of them was just that very strong sense of alignment around purpose and values and brand. They believed in the brand, they loved the brand. So I see a deeper sense of commitment when I know someone loves the brand. I certainly have seen that in my practice in the last 18 months since COVID has hit us all.
It's definitely in that alignment piece. And I see the same thing in the work that we do, and we talk about this quite a lot. It's about connecting into with an organisation's purpose and understanding the brand experience that they want to deliver, because that really informs everything from the culture to the values of the organisation. And when you see employees that are aligned with that and are connected to that, the returns on the business investment and the happiness written indexes and the performance and the productivity, it all goes through the roof.
Because of discretionary effort. If you believe in something, if you love it, you will go that extra mile. You'll give the extra 10% and beyond. And that's what leaders are looking for. That's what CEOs are looking for. Who's going to be the person who actually demonstrates discretionary effort every day in their role? Now, I've seen a huge deficit in this in different scenarios very recently in different contexts. And I was talking to a great friend of mine who's a surgeon last night, because she had a scenario where a young registrar gave the wrong dose to someone in the hospital. And I thought, that's just another example of discretionary effort. Who's asking the questions? Who's demonstrating that critical thinking? And what that means is when you come across, a diagnosis and you look at 1,000 milligrams of lithium, and you should know, that seems like a lot. I might just ask that question. I might just go down this line of inquiry to find out if that's really what we should be doing. So for all of us, it's about really paying attention to what's going on and being focused, but demonstrating some critical thinking when it comes to what we should be doing. And then if we think something's not right, it's showing some discretionary effort and going above and beyond what we get paid to do.
And is that discretionary effort, you think, it's for that larger problem solving and looking at the bigger picture and trying to understand, well, what is the actual outcome that we're trying to achieve here? What are the things that I should be considering in that problem solving process?
Of course. So we all get paid to do a certain role, but I have friends that work across banking in very high places, and what they're all saying is the people that they're looking to promote are people who are showing that extra level of effort and stepping in when they know someone's stepped back and offering up new solutions above and beyond what they're being paid to do. Now, I know it's a very difficult time to ask more of people because we have no boundaries at home. We're homeschooling. Life's never been so demanding. So it's a tough call to say, you know what, you've actually got to work harder. But now is the time. I think the next 2 years is critical. And if you are prepared to show that discretionary effort, I think the payoff will be there.
And in terms of creating that shared purpose in organisations, what have you seen as an effective way of actually getting that shared purpose across teams within the business?
What I'm seeing that really is having an impact on the motivation and mobilisation of employees towards transformation is stopping to reflect on the history of the business and where the business has come from, how it was created, the backstory to the start of that particular organisation, and connecting into those original values that sat around the start of the business, whether it's 100 years old or 2 years old. But when you ask a team to reflect on that and to go through some original photos of the teams that started and how they started and the purpose, you get a very strong sense of belonging, and that inclusivity and sense of belonging is everything. And EY did a great study a couple of years ago about identity and belonging, the link between that and performance. So when we feel like we belong, we're 3.5 times more likely to reach our potential. When we have a strong sense of identity, that's connected to that belonging. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it. You are far more likely to absorb change and to manage setbacks and to keep delivering. If you've got that strong sense of connectedness to a business and the purpose and that shared mission. And we all know what it's like to be drifting from that alignment. And I think that the best move you can make if you know that your heart's not in it is to walk away, because you'll only damage yourself and the outcomes that you're delivering.
Thanks for tuning in today. This season is all about designing a work life you love, but you can't achieve this if you don't know what it is that you want from your life and from your work. So to help you with this, I've created a free downloadable to get you on track. This little downloadable is my toolkit to clarifying your purpose and uncovering your values. Two things that I like to think of as setting my North Star, the place that I am heading to. You can grab this at melissamarsden.com.au/North Star. Now, let's get back to the episode. So what inspired you to launch Future Fitco, and how does this program fulfill your desire to empower people in enhancing their careers?
Well, Future Fit is completely about understanding those human skills that will be the powerful differentiators in the future of work. And it's always been the mission since I created that in 2012. And I'm deeply inspired by the work that I do because it's really about taking control. And my hope is from that people understand now that I can leverage these skills that I have, I have options about how to run my life. And I might want to not work Mondays and Fridays. And my hope is that by really mastering those human skills, people will get to a point where they simply start to take more control over their work and life. And as you say, this is your mission, to help people with that design, to be quite deliberate about how you want to run your life instead of just falling back into autopilot or the default, because I personally never found that default very rewarding. And I guess it's through my experience of designing my own life that I want other people to understand the liberation, that comes with that, and the personal power that comes with that. And it's not for everyone, and I understand, but there are certainly still micro ways that you can take control of your life, even if that's not working Mondays and Fridays. You don't have to run a business to say, what, my high performance hours are between 6 and 12 every day, so I'm going to do that 3-4 days a week or whatever. So everyone gets the best out of you.
So it's really about having the understanding of yourself to be able to deliver those better high-performing outcomes back to the organisation you work with, or in your own organisation if that's what you choose to do as well.
Yeah, it's about understanding that the structure, the office is manufactured by humans. We built an office and someone decided that we should all go to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But, we're not necessarily wired to be high-performing 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It never made any sense to me. So I never took a job where I had to do that. And I will tirelessly encourage people to figure out how to do life on their terms, because it is possible.
And do you think the pandemic has really given people permission to change these work hours and really start to push back on that?
Well, we're seeing a remarkable amount of people who are leaving the workforce, and we're seeing Microsoft did a study where basically 40% of the global workforce, and we're talking about highly skilled knowledge workers here. So this is a certain segment of the population that's very privileged. And I think there are about 400,000 or 500,000 knowledge workers around Australia, and they're certainly in a position to leverage their skills and reputation and network in a way they never have before. So I think it's been a remarkable wake-up call, but I still think there's going to be a lag. Like, my prediction for 2022 is that, I think we're a long way off stabilising in terms of going back into the office, in air quotes. I suspect what's going to happen is that, businesses will go back and forth and try to negotiate with employees. And I think by mid to late next year, we are going to have tens of thousands of people who are like, you know what, it's not going to suit me. This mandating days, I'm over it. I hung in there through the Christmas, New Year period. I sort of waited for things to stabilise, and they're not going the way that I'd like them to go. And so I'm going to leave and go to the competitor down the road who's offering a completely flexible way of working. So I'm going to take that up. And why not?
Do you think there's another possibility in there that we'll end up with a really large freelance economy as well?
Oh, it's extraordinary. The freelance economy was growing at a rate of knots even before COVID. In fact, I think by 2027, the majority of the US workforce were going to be freelance. So, we were screaming in that direction. And I think COVID has only accelerate that movement. And I think the greatest concern that business should have is, what are they going to do about having potentially tens of thousands of staff members who are suddenly empowered and suddenly ready to do a new deal that's not going to suit the business? So I think that's going to be a huge shock to our large enterprise organisations that are very used to having the upper hand and very used to having, a dynamic of power that has always worked in their favour.
Yeah, so we're looking at a total shift in power and people sort of banding together to change the status quo.
I think it's awesome. I think the opportunity is staggering for people. And I think if you want to take control of your life, real control, then the next 2 years is the time to do that, because I feel like the window is going to close. And once we do stabilise into a new way of working, it's going to be harder to say, you know what, I feel like I want to make a change. I really feel like the window is here. You have to be part of that conversation in the workplace. The future is about what you want it to look like. So you've got to have a say. You've got to speak up.
And I think, as you and I were talking about earlier, there's a real divide in terms of the organisations that we're seeing move towards these more dynamic, flexible, hybrid workplaces, and those that are sort of really, really grasping onto the way things have always been. And I think there's going to be a really big impact in that. But they're across sectors. So if everyone in that sector, and that's probably an overstatement too, there's probably not going to be everyone, but if there's a large proportion of organisations within that sector that are clinging to those old ways of doing things, how do you think that's going to disrupt those industries?
I think it's wild that there are businesses that are trying to mandate days in the office, and what we're already seeing is that those employees are saying, look, thanks very much for the offer, but I'm going to resign and do this a different way. So that retention, that staff retention is severely threatened by old school models of working. Those old ways of working, they're not playing into the life that I think that we've all realised we can have, even if it's a slightly different version of going into the office 9 to 5. We've all got a taste of what it's like to have more flexibility, and there are many of us who will want to keep some degree of that. And I think it's wild that businesses aren't talking to their staff about what they want, because business is about people. If the people aren't being asked how they want to move forward, then how can a business expect those people to stay and to, as I said, really deliver that discretionary effort that lifts the bottom line? And what we're already seeing in the US is the big old school institutions. Of course, it's banking and finance, and they're saying, we expect everyone back in the office. And it's like, that's lovely, but it's not going to happen. Yeah. And so they're seeing the pushback, and the pushback is real. I don't think it's even started in Australia, but it is coming. It's coming down the pipeline, and leaders are in for a real shock. And if you are disconnected from the reality of the conversations that are going on, you'll be pretty surprised with what comes your way. But as a leader, I can't help but think, why wouldn't you want more flexibility yourself? These structures are falling apart. And they should fall apart. So if there's a GM trying to impress a CEO by sending out the email that says everyone's going to be back in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, that's not a mindset that I think is going to support a successful modern leader.
Are you seeing different approaches across different states? Because what I see here in Queensland is that we haven't been exposed to the same lengths of lockdowns that Sydney and Melbourne have. And so I think our work structures and our work routines have been relatively returned to normal by comparison to some of our other counterparts in other states. What have you observed in that?
This is what I find so interesting, that everyone's COVID experience is so individual. And I talk about the rise of the individual in Future Fit, and that being a major issue for business, but opportunity for all of us. And I do see a difference. And I had the first 6 months in lockdown in Melbourne in last year. And I absolutely see the difference in attitudes, because everyone's experience has been so drastically different. And you can see businesses that are leaving their staff alone because they know, if you're in Victoria, as a leader, you just know it's the right time to leave your staff alone. And even within one business, you see one leader dealing with different states in different ways, because everyone's in a different context, everyone's living a different COVID experience, and that is real. And it has a huge impact on motivation and ability to deliver.
And it's good that you've got leaders that are acknowledging that variability and treating everyone individually and responding to where they're at, as opposed to taking that blanket approach.
Well, it's about reading the room, isn't it? You can't take one blanket policy and apply it across the board when you've got 42,000 staff who all have a distinctive individual experience they've gone through, be they single, at home, homeschooling 3 kids, out of lockdown, in lockdown for 200 days. So the experience is highly contextual, and you need leaders who are reading the room and who are responding accordingly. And you certainly want to feel like you're connected to the person who's leading you. You want to feel like they're connected to your experience, even if they are not in the same state.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to take you back to one of the skills that you've said that we need to be able to lead with impact, and that's creativity. Now, I'm particularly interested in this skill because obviously being a creative myself with a design background, creativity is something that I kind of feel I have inherently, but I also find it very difficult to articulate what creativity is or how that shows up in other areas of my business and my work life. So I'm keen to understand, what is your definition of creativity and how do you see this show up in the skills that we're going to need to be able to lead with impact in the future?
I think creativity is anything that leads to innovation. That can be interpreted in a whole host of different ways, but creativity is a key driver of growth because we're going into new markets with new problems and we are going to need new solutions for those problems. And so that's where true creativity comes in. We're in a highly competitive environment, and so creativity is literally that last remaining competitive advantage. If you're more creative, you'll be creating new value for a business and more value for a business. So what an incredible skill to have. And everyone needs to know that we all have a degree of creativity in us and we can learn it. So the small c creativity is that creativity that we all employ when we are, pulling leftovers together from last night's dinner or rearranging our closet. So we all have that degree of small c creativity that then steps up into professional c creativity. So that's kind of writing a report, pulling together a PowerPoint. That's something that we do in our professional lives. And, that can be a rehearsal for big C creativity. Now, usually that's defined as a shift in cultural paradigm. So I would say the Opera House is a great example of big C creativity. So everyone has that in their own way. So what are the big C creativity projects that you have in your life? And what may have been a rehearsal up, I would say writing a book for me is big C creativity. That didn't think I'd be able to do it, but I did. And I probably had spent every single day rehearsing for that because every single day I was writing 1,000 words as a reporter. Every single day I was, doing all the things that you need to do to kind of build up that creativity, muscle, if you like. And what was probably most important for me was how I set myself up to be more creative. And lots of research around that. Mainly, the point is that as we get older, we take on more responsibilities. We've got less playtime. So 98% of 5-year-olds are considered highly creative, right? But by the time we get to 20, that's down to 2% because we just have no fun anymore. We don't have playtime. And so one of the easiest ways that I've created more space in my life for divergent thinking is walking. So if we walk for half an hour every day, that increases our divergent thinking, our creative thinking by 60%, according to Stanford. And I walk 7Ks a day. It takes me about an hour 15. I started about 4 years ago. It's changed my life. And I know that there's no way I could have written a book unless I was walking every day, processing. Divergent and convergent thinking are different types of creativity, but divergent thinking is where your neurons are sparking and igniting new ideas, like brand new connections are made, instead of looking at something and being critical, like critically creative. So no doubt anyone who's been through COVID has started some new habits, but anything that gives yourself space and that allows you to be present. And I do that through walking and swimming because I don't have my phone when I'm swimming. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be a huge boost of creativity. And it's certainly a skill that we are all going to need more of, more often. And so it's certainly worthwhile investing and upgrading that skill.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way that you've described that in terms of just the walking and finding the space, because I know that for myself is that having that opportunity for your mind to wander and it starts to reconnect different pathways and different ideas. And that's when you kind of get those, in the shower moments and those aha moments. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Now I know what I need to do. And these two things. And you wouldn't have come up with that if you were sitting there like focused on trying to solve that problem.
And again, if you're constantly distracted and sort of bound by duty all day long, of course you don't have any space to give yourself. So of all the skills, and there is so much more research coming out about the real demand for soft skills, power skills, real skills across the labour force, because these are the skills that solve problems in a crisis. Yes, an Excel spreadsheet is helpful, but when you've got a really creative leader, that's going to get the business out of a problem and out of a crisis and ahead of the competition. So that's why there's such a demand across the labour force for them. And there's no wonder, because we're all dealing with a whole new arena.
Absolutely. So you mentioned there one of the routines and rituals that you have for your own life in terms of how you've started to design your own work life. What are some of the other routines and rituals that you've incorporated, whether there be an annual routine or a ritual that you carry out to kind of make sure that you're still living the life that you want to be living and keeping it tight to where you want to be heading?
I think there are two things that I do that I've learnt to do because I finally understood the value of them. So the first one is allocating continuous learning every quarter, making sure that I'm upgrading my skills every quarter in a way that's aligned with the business strategy. Mm-hmm. And so I say to everyone listening, find out what your business strategy is for 2030 and think about, are your skills going to be aligned with the skills that are going to be of value to the business, in 5 to 10 years' time, because they will all be shifting if we're looking closely enough. So I'm pretty obsessed with continuous learning because it's so rewarding. And secondly, on a far more personal note, Pilates and walking and swimming are 3 things that I'm consistent about, and they're things that set up my day. So I'll do something every morning, 5-6 mornings a week. And for me, that sets my day up for the best chance I have at striking everything off the to-do list. Gosh, I really understand the value of walking. I understand the value of going on even a 1-week retreat every year. I can't always make that happen. But when I do, the payoff is just so huge. And we always think, why don't we do this more often?
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful to really think about what makes you the happiest, what sets your day up for the best shot at a productive day, and being committed.
Awesome. Now, earlier in the chat, you mentioned how you always knew that you wanted to sort of be putting yourselves in these positions where you were supporting others and helping others. Have you always had that really innate sense of personal purpose? And how has this then realigned itself as your roles have changed throughout your career?
Well, I think there's been a common thread through all of the roles I've had in life, and that has been that I've wanted to bring the best out in other people, and I've wanted to share the stories that other people have to positively impact those around us. And I think that's been really consistent as a journalist, as an author, as a communication director, as an international aid worker. That common thread that runs through all of those roles is that I want to share stories that lift others. And that's been consistent through my life. I remember when I was 7 years old, I went into my dad's office, and my dad's pretty scary, gruff guy. And I said, I think I want to be an actor. And he looked down his glasses at me, totally disapproved. And he said, look, I'd probably prefer that you went into something more stable. I'd probably prefer that you were a lawyer. And I said, all right, I'm going to meet you halfway, and I'm going to be a journalist, because that way I've got stability in a role. But there's that performance element of it, and there's that element of connecting with people constantly. So I negotiated with my dad before I was 10, and I know
how wise you were before you were 10.
You know what? My dad was an entrepreneur pushing all the boundaries, in his teens, and he just knew there was no way he wanted to be taking phone calls in the middle of the night to send me money. And he wanted me to have a career that was very character building, and that was the right call. And it's been, what an extraordinary career so far. So I've been very, very fortunate to have been surrounded by great mentors, advisors and sponsors that have really helped me negotiate the changes that I've been through, which have been kind of dramatic at times.
But what a fun ride.
So far, so good.
And one of the questions I've got for you around that is, you and I were talking a bit earlier around values and the role that they've played as well, and that being so wise at, before you're even 10 and being able to negotiate with your dad about what kind of role you wanted to take on as a career. Where did the foundation of values start to play in for you, and how old were you before you started to kind of get a grasp on what that was and what your values were?
I think as we were talking earlier about values, and I actually didn't really know what culture was. I didn't know what values were until I was 35. All I did was work my guts out until I left a newsroom in pretty unfavourable circumstances, and then realised that was actually a toxic work culture. I wasn't there because my values were not aligned with the culture that was driving the performance of the news director. And so that was my awakening into understanding and connecting further into the values that really had grounded me through my career. And I think those values have always been there. I've just never really thought about them that deeply until then. But going back to that conversation with my dad was hoping for 3 boys. He got 3 girls, and he treated us like boys. Like he'd throw us off the back of the boat 80 mile out to sea when we were fishing to learn to scuba dive. Like there was no PADI instructor. We were just thrown over the side of the boat. We were on quad bikes. We had a very active childhood that wasn't very girly, And I think that I was exposed to values around integrity and a deep sense of character and hard work, because my dad worked for himself. He started his own business, retired very early, but always had a massive project on the go. And so I think being exposed to that at a very young age really informed me about what kind of person I wanted to be. And I'm really glad that, Dad said to us, the only thing I'm going to give you is your education, and then it's up to you. And that was, in hindsight, what a great decision that I did not respect or understand at the time. But now I think that was the greatest gift that Mum and Dad had handed to us, because we've had to make it work on our own. And, I've learnt a lot that I wouldn't have learnt unless I created a business by myself. Like you, like everyone listening who runs a business will know, every day you learn something about yourself and about the world that you never want to take back. Like that's integrity that's grounded me in making decisions that I hope are in the best interest for everyone around me, not just me.
And it's really interesting, just going back to that point about you didn't really understand your values until it was that pivotal moment. It was kind of like similar to me when, everything shit hit the fan. That was when you started looking at your life and you looked at your values, and that's when you kind of were able to pinpoint them and unpick them and go, oh, that's what I'm about and that's what's important to me.
And I was in a newsroom. So newsrooms, yes, there's a culture, but no one talks about leadership or culture, or it just doesn't exist. And so I didn't even know what that was until I started working in L&D, and then realised how toxic that culture was for me. And that was why I couldn't be there. And I think for all of us, we all know what it's like to be in a culture that doesn't align with your values. And when you know, you've got to go.
And isn't it great that you now get to work with organisations and help them educate this into their people from an earlier part of their careers, because there's not something that I think we were exposed to. It wasn't the norm back then, but I think there's such a big appetite for that now, and you get to be part of that.
I was saying to a colleague of mine, gosh, we've got the best job in the world. We work with these amazing companies who genuinely believe and know that transformation can't happen in a business unless it's happening for an individual. And so that's where we come in. And so we get to take that front row seat to real growth, innovation that drives that cultural change across really big business. So, and what better time to be doing that to set everyone up for real capability throughout this transformation that we're all going through.
Yeah. It has been a wonderful chat with you today. If I could get you to leave one tip for our listeners as to what would be the one thing that you think that people should be focusing on to make sure that they're future fit?
There's something that I haven't put in the book that I think is critical. I think wellbeing is a skill and we have to work hard at it. And I think, being the master of your own wellbeing policy is going to set you up for a really rewarding career and set you up for absorbing change and transition if that's something that's coming your way. We'll talk about resilience, and I think that word's really overused. I think that resilience is a doing word. I think you've got to get out of bed and make your bed every morning, even when you're not feeling great. You've got to stick to your routine because it supports your mental health and supports your physical health. And we all need our own wellbeing strategy, and we need to be committed to that because that way the whole community benefits from it. So this is about being closely connected to the community that you're in and doing meaningful work. And it's difficult to do all that unless you're looking after yourself properly. If I was to rewrite Future Fit, that would be up the front for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great tip because, again, if we've learned anything from the last 18 months and going through COVID, wellbeing has become top of the agenda for many organisations, and if it hasn't, it should be, because without looking after ourselves, there's not much better we can do for our organisations, for our family, for anyone else, because, there's nothing left to give.
And when you role model that to others, I think that's critical. Like when you put your out of office on or whatever it is you're doing, or do a walking meeting or however it is that you want to interpret that, you're saying to everyone around you, this is normal, this is not the new normal, this is the forever normal. And you can never underestimate how many people are looking at you to take the lead. So people look at you as a role model, whether you know it or not. And it's really critical to demonstrate wellbeing in a way that that is just simply gives everyone the green light to do what works for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Now, if any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you or find out a little bit more about Future Fit Co and the programs that you run, where would be the best place for them to find you?
Probably the easiest place is futurefitco.com.au, and you can email me directly through the website, but that has a summary of what we do and where you can find the book if you would like to give it a go.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Andrea. You've shared so much great insight into how we can all get future fit.
Thanks, Mel.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for Work Life by Design. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love you to rate, review, or subscribe, or all three, in iTunes and share it with your friends so we can continue to build this community. I would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, you can connect with me on Instagram @Melmar or send me an email at melissa@melissamarsden.com.au. I hope this episode has given you a few sparks of inspiration so you can design a work life you love.